Hi, welcome to Parallel Scientific Computing. Now onwards, we'll talk about OpenACC. Um, I am Rupesh Nasre and I'll be your co-learner in this journey of OpenACC. So let's begin. Our overall agenda is that in the context of OpenACC, we are going to look at what is meant by an accelerator. Essentially, that ACC stands for accelerator. We'll look at a small Hello World program first and see some of the nuances of running your program using an accelerator, and uh, also some of the aspects of compiling and executing the program. How do you do it, let's say, on your laptop, or how do you do it, let's say, on a cluster such as Aqua. Later, uh, this particular first part is something which we'll try to do today. Later, we'll go deeper into the syntax and the semantics of OpenACC. So first, we'll study how do you specify parallelism. Uh, Similar to OpenMP, there are pragmas, but then there are some concepts which are slightly different. For example, kernel. Then there is a loop keyword in OpenACC, which we are going to study. There is also something very peculiar when it comes to OpenACC, which is about the data movement, which we did not require in the context of OpenMP, but it is required, and we'll study all those data movement related constructs such as copy, create, enter, and exit uh, as we move along. Then, similar to OpenMP, we will have the notions of reductions as well as atomics that we are going to study. And then there are certain optimizations which we should be aware of. We should know how things are executed underneath. Once we have modeled our computation using OpenACC, using on a GPU, and finally we are doing all this parallel processing for performance. So we need to optimize our processing, and there are certain high-level patterns which we should be able to apply for optimizations. But of course, there will be some patterns which are going to be specific to certain applications which we have to devise on our own. Um, at the forefront, I would like to acknowledge that these slides have been created using the material which is available at these places, openacc.org. Uh, and then there are certain tutorials, various strategies, as well as the OpenACC specification. All of this is available at different places, and I have borrowed the material from there and just added my flavor. So if you like something, that is likely to be from one of these tutorials, but if there is some mistake, it is likely that I have added it. So just hold on and bear with me. If you find any mistake, just let me know. I'll be able to modify these slides. All right. So coming to our course, Parallel Scientific Computing, what we have studied so far are uh, two different aspects of performing the parallelization. One is on a multi-core setup on the CPU, and another is also on the CPU but in a distributed setup. Right? So I'm going to show those two, which will help us understand where the accelerator programming fits. So the first one, which is the multi-core one, it has a single CPU, which has, so this box, orange box, is a single CPU, and it has lots of cores. So assume that these are various cores which I'm showing. Um, and then this blue part is the memory. This memory is shared across all the cores, which means that if I write from one core, that is, let's say, one thread which is running on a particular core, if I write to some memory location in this memory, which we call as DRAM, dynamic RAM, or our shared memory, then that write is going to be visible sometime in future to the other core, right? So the thread running on the other core will be able to read it. That's why this is called as a shared memory paradigm. And to program such a setup, we have used OpenMP. There are other library or frameworks such as pthreads and silk and many others using which we can program such a shared memory system. When we talked about the second part, which was if you take this single computer, which might be multi-core in itself, and connect it via certain interconnect, we might be able to distribute the computation in this environment, which naturally we called as a distributed setup, where there are possibly multiple cores on a single machine, but then the overall computation is happening together across all these machines, which means that there are multiple processes across this setup, across this distributed setup, using which we were able to perform the overall computation. And if there is some information which is required for as a machine, if I require some computation, some information from another machine, then I need to communicate with that machine using certain calls. In the context of MPI, we call them as send and receive. So I send the message or I receive the message. And then there are variations of these like scatter, gather, broadcast, etc. Right? So this was our basic setup, and we used MPI for that purpose. But there are other frameworks. For example, you can use a MapReduce framework to offload your computation onto a cluster, or Hadoop as a parallel file system in a distributed setup. In the context of CPU GPU or accelerator programming setup, so accelerator doesn't always mean a GPU, but that is the most widely used setup, and therefore I'm going to use these two words a little interchangeably. But technically, accelerator need not be a GPU. It could as well be, for example, another CPU itself. For example, the OpenSCC that we are going to use, using which you'll be able to even run your program, OpenSCC program, not only on the GPU but also on the CPU in a multi-core fashion. I mean, in a multi-threaded fashion. So that is also possible. You can have an x86, let's say, Intel mic system, which can be used as an accelerator, for example. FPGA could be used as an accelerator. So all of these are different accelerators. GPUs nonetheless are more prominent, and therefore we'll use these two words interchangeably more in a practical setting. So how does this setup look like? Again, we have this CPU which is going to be used. By the way, the OpenSCC is just one way of programming the CPU GPU computation, but there are others like CUDA, which you might have heard, as well as OpenCL, Open Computing Language. So all of these are different ways in which you will be able to program GPUs. So we have our CPU, very similar to what it is in the multi-core setup or in a one machine of a distributed setup. And along with that, there is another box, which is a GPU. What are the differences between these two? First of all, the number of lines you see are very different. There are larger but fewer lines in CPU, and smaller and more number of lines on the GPU. These lines we said are cores, which means that there are more number of cores on the GPU typically, and those are smaller. What does that mean is that those are most probably less powerful. What does less powerful mean? In this context, we'll say that those are probably going to be simpler cores. One is their frequency is going to be smaller. Another thing could be that instead of out of core execution and very optimized algorithms for, let's say, branch prediction, or larger branch history buffers, etc. There might be smaller branch history buffers, or maybe there is no out of order execution, maybe there is in order execution, and so on. So all of these are possibilities which might make these cores simpler. There are multiple reasons which need to be done. One of the prominent reasons being power, where the energy efficiency of so many cores are working together, and therefore the energy requirement might just shoot up. So we need to be careful about that part. And then if you notice this blue part, which we called as memory, that blue part also exists on the GPU or the accelerator, which means that typically the GPUs have their own separate memory, which is not shared across CPU and GPU. And if you also notice, this memory is also smaller compared to the typical CPU memory. So typical CPU memories could be several hundreds of GBs on a server scale. It could be as well be in terabytes, for example. Right? Whereas the GPU memories are typically very small, a few tens of GBs. Uh, the ones that you might be using on Aqua might have 32 GB of RAM on the GPU. So these two boxes together form the CPU GPU system. But how do they communicate with each other? Because they have different cores, they have different memories, and so on. So that communication needs to happen via some sort of a connection or some interconnect or a bus between the two. Using this bus, they will communicate with each other. Typically, it's the CPU who is the initiator who communicates with the GPU. Typically, GPU doesn't communicate directly with the CPU, which means the initiation happens mostly from the CPU side. In this context, sometimes the CPU is called as a host because it is the one that is starting the overall program. It is deciding when to communicate with the other GPU and so on. And it is actually managing the overall computation of your code. Therefore, it is called as a host. The GPU is typically called as a device. Right? So we sometimes say CPU GPU computation or host device communication, like that. So that is also just a nomenclature. So as you can see, the CPU GPU part has similarities with both multi-core as well as distributed. The multi-core part, because both the CPU computation here as well as the GPU computation here can happen in a shared memory environment. For example, all the threads which are running on the GPU will have access to this memory, which means that this is very similar to shared memory system as a multi-core system. Um, Whereas if when you consider CPU GPU communication, they don't have a common memory, and therefore they need to communicate their information via some sort of an interconnect, and therefore there is a natural distributed communication happening between CPU and GPU. And as we have studied in the MPI part, the communication is very crucial from the perspective of performance, in the sense that the communication should get reduced. And therefore, in the context of CPU GPU also, this communication should get reduced as much as possible if you want to benefit in terms of performance. This is going to be a crucial aspect as we study more of OpenACC related constructs. All right, so let's move ahead, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit onto these CPUs and GPUs. So this bus that we talked about is often it's PCI Express bus, but sometimes there could be other technologies which you can use. For example, there could be some proprietary interconnect, for example, NVLink from NVIDIA, which can be used. And as you can see, there is a DRAM, which is memory on the CPU, and there is DRAM, which is memory on the GPU. This is also called as graphics memory sometimes, because these are called as graphics processing units. Originally, these were used for graphics purposes, where you have large amount of data and let's say graphics data, let's say some sort of triangulation of a particular image, then that triangulation might get converted into, let's say, pixels and so on, or vice versa. And then you are operating on these elements, which could be triangles or quadrilaterals or pixels, and all the operations that you are performing are kind of independent, or almost all of them are independent. For example, if you want to, let's say, increase the intensity of a particular of an image, you could decide a portion within the image and increase the intensity, which means that you are changing the intensity of each pixel, which can be nicely done by one graphics processor or one graphics core, which is given, let's say, one pixel or a set of pixels. So that is a very nicely parallel operation. So this particular kind of processing, although it started in the graphics and the games domain, people have found out that this is very useful in the context of general purpose computing. General purpose meaning which need not be related to graphics. For example, if I'm doing some sort of let's say heat wave equation, or I'm trying to simulate certain ocean current and so on, or I'm just performing some sort of processing on a large graph, let's say Facebook or Twitter. All of these are general purpose processing. Right? I want to find out the nth digit in the pi calculation and so on. So all of these are general purpose computations which can be nicely modeled even on a parallel processor like a graphics processor. So it has evolved quite a bit, and we'll avoid getting into the historical aspects of GPUs. But let's focus on the programming aspects of GPU. But before that, I'll just mention that these two memories are going to be separate, and what are the implications of that. This is going to be a crucial point, as I have been mentioning. Right? So since these have separate memories, that means that if there is a variable which you declare on the CPU, then the GPU cannot access it. That means a GPU thread, a thread which is running on the GPU cannot directly access it. And vice versa. If there is a variable which you create somehow on the GPU, a CPU will not be able to directly access it. You need to do something about it. What would that something be? In general, you have to copy the data from one memory to another. And where will you copy it from? Via the PCI Express bus. That is the interconnect between the two. So it so happens that OpenSSE underneath allows you copies this data across the two devices automatically without your knowledge, and that can be really a boon because that can simplify your programming quite a bit. However, it can be a downside also. If you want performance out of your code, leaving it all the way for OpenSSE to figure out when to copy data and how much data to copy, that may not always be very clear from the way the code is written. It might be dependent on the application semantics, or there might be compilation reasons using which OpenSSE might not be able to figure out how much data to copy. So it might end up copying all the data just to be safe, but that might not be the most optimal way of it. And therefore, as a programmer, I might be able to optimize this communication across CPU and GPU. I might be able to copy small amount of data, or I might be able to copy fewer number of times across CPU and GPU, and make sure that the semantics of the application are still maintained. So this is something which we have to worry about. So initially we will start naively, which means that we'll just let OpenSSE take care of this, the way OpenMP, for example, allowed us to write the programs OpenSSE parallel for, OpenMP parallel for, and that allowed us to just parallelize the loop. But slowly we figured out that there are ways in which we need to worry about. Let's say I can talk about there could be data races, so I need to be worried about, let's say, some sort of reductions happening, right? So all of these quirks are going to come in even in the context of OpenSSE in slightly different manner. So we'll study all of that as we go along. Since many of us have not programmed GPUs before, it's important to understand how the typical program flow is going to be. So the way we have talked about GPU is that it's a separate processor, right, from your CPU. Although it is there as part of the same machine. Let's say if you open the box, you will probably find one chip for the CPU or one motherboard for the CPU, and then another motherboard for the GPU or another device altogether. There are ways in which you can have both the CPU and GPU integrated onto the same die. That is also possible. These are called as integrated GPUs. But by and large, OpenSSE expects or assumes that these two are going to be separate devices and separate memories, etc. So therefore, these are called as discrete GPUs. So a typical program flow starts from main, right? Our main function, let's say, which is running. So the a.out that you have is going to get loaded into the operating system. Whose operating system? It has to be CPU's operating system because that is the host. Right? The GPU is not coming into play right now. Right? So a.out gets loaded into the operating system of the CPU, I mean running on the CPU. Then we are going to go to main and execution begins. What is this execution? What is the type of this execution? It is going to be the sequential execution running on the CPU. Right? So this is where it is going to start. At some point in time, you might decide that, oh, this seems to be a nicely parallel computation. So you might run it in parallel either on the CPU or on the GPU. Very similar to our OpenMP threads. We start sequentially. then hash pragma OMP parallel comes in, or hash pragma OMP parallel for, and at that time we start forking the threads, right? So a similar manner, you might decide to run it in parallel onto the GPU. At that time, I'm going to specify some sort of a constraint. In this case, I'm going to have some pragma which is going to tell that this is accelerator based programming, and therefore I'm going to have some parallel program. So this kind of processing is going to be then running CPU program and going into the GPU or going into the accelerator. The accelerator is going to perform some processing and give the results back to the CPU, and then the CPU is going to make use of those results and process further, right? So this is the overall flow which is going to happen. So I'm just going to show that pictorially, right? So we again have these two devices, CPU and GPU. They are interconnected via some PCI Express bus or NVLink and so on. The in typical simulations or in typical real world scenarios, the way the CPU or your ADOT is going to run is that it is going to not generate the input, right? The input is likely to be given as part of, let's say, some external device or some external input, right? Typically it gets stored inside your file system onto the disk, but that is just one scenario I'm showing, because I'm talking about a server scale setup where you have a large amount of data which need not be randomly generated. It could be actually coming from a file, or it could be coming from a socket. For example, you are talking about an IoT device or some medical imaging device where you are getting the data via some port onto the CPU, right? So in any case, you are going to read that data into the CPU memory first, right? So you are going to load that data onto the CPU memory. Most of the GPU processing systems do not have direct file handling constructs, right? Those are good for computation related aspects, not the other, not all the libraries are, for example, available for the GPUs. So in fact, GPU does not have a direct connection with the file system anyway, right? So it has to go through the CPU in that case. So the first step is to load the data from file system into the CPU memory, CPU RAM. Using this memory, now I am going to decide what portion I need to first execute on the CPU and what portion which I need to offload to the GPU. Once I decide that, I need to copy this data to the GPU, which could be part of the data. I mean, some processing might happen on the CPU itself. So I copy whatever is required from CPU to GPU memory. On the GPU, I'm going to run some sort of an execution, right? That execution, or let's call it a function, right? So that function that runs onto the GPU is called as a kernel. This kernel is going to give me some compute intensive part, which is going to use this data that I have copied from CPU. I'm going to perform some number crunching operations. I get the result. Once I have the result ready onto the GPU, what does that mean onto the GPU? In the GPU memory. Right? The result is also available in the GPU memory, which I want on the CPU. And therefore, the fourth step is to get the results back from GPU to CPU. That means from GPU memory to CPU memory. And in both steps 2 and 4, I am using that PCI Express interconnect. Once I have the results, well, I am done with my job. I am going to make use of that onto the CPU, which internally might actually involve that I want to perform some next step onto this data. So I again copy it back, or if the results are already available, I might make use of them onto the GPU, which means that I offload the next part of the computation onto the GPU. GPU again performs its works and so on. So this can be an iterative processing. Finally, I exit from the host program, which is running on the CPU. So this overall processing allows us to think of CPU and GPU as working together for some common processing. So CPU is taking charge of the overall initial processing, offloading the important or maybe the parallel parts to the GPU, and that is going to help in overall improvement of the execution time of the program. Otherwise, if I had run it totally onto the CPU, I would have gotten some performance. Let's say it took 10 seconds to run, whereas I offload some computation, maybe it takes 5 seconds to run. So that is going to be an advantage. There will be codes which might take 10 seconds on the CPU, but if you offload to the GPU, it might require 12 seconds or 13 seconds overall. So that is also possible. Why would such a processing on the GPU, which is going to be a very powerful machine, so to say, because it has more number of cores, will take larger amount of time? Think about it for a moment. You can as well pause the video and think about it, that why would GPU make the processing slow? So there are multiple reasons why this can happen. One is that, as we said, the GPUs are simpler cores, and therefore it's possible that, so the clock frequency at which the GPU cores are running, that is much smaller compared to that of the CPU, right? On CPU, you might have 2.4, 2.6, even 3 point something gigahertz of clock, whereas on GPU, you will probably see maybe 700 megahertz, which is maybe one third of or one third or one fourth of that of a CPU core, and therefore the overall execution might take time. The advantage you get is because of the parallelism, but if there isn't enough parallelism in your code, then GPU cannot do anything. It's probably better in such cases to run the code sequentially on the CPU. So that is one reason, that there isn't enough parallelism into the code. The second reason could be that you get some benefit when you run it on the GPU, but the step number 2 and step number 4, these also take time, which means that copying across the two devices, CPU and GPU, is also going to be one extra time consuming part, which is going to play a role, which was not there when you had run the code directly on the CPU. There was no copy. It was all in your CPU memory. Right? So this communication is also an important factor, which is going to affect the overall speed up. So both these aspects are going to come into play. How much parallelism exists in your code, and what is the cost of communication, right? Whether it makes sense to offload it, because the overall work that is done onto the GPU as part of step 3, this advantage should outweigh the disadvantages of copy. Then only you will start getting benefits. And that's one of the reasons why people say that if you have smaller amount of data, well, run it on through the CPU. Only when it becomes little larger, let's say you have tens of thousands of data items or millions of data items, then it makes sense to offload it to the GPU, so that the communication cost is downplayed by the computation cost and so on. Right? So this overall flow you should definitely remember, because that is how we are going to model our computation, as well as for optimizing we have to worry about this flow. Where does optimization come into play? One of the important things is to avoid copying. Where does avoid copying come into picture? On the CPU, I might have a do while loop. Right? This step number 5 might again go back to step number 2, and so on. This loop might keep repeating the way we have done all our numerical processing. There is a do while loop which is running on the CPU, and then inside that there is a for loop which we are trying to parallelize. This for loop, now we are going to offload that part to the GPU because it is nicely parallel. This do while loop, which is running until, let's say, certain condition is met or a certain error criteria is reached and so on, or certain number of iterations are done, this is still happening onto the CPU. Right? So when I am computing, let's say I am going iteration 1, iteration 2, iteration 3, like that, iteration 1's result is available already into the GPU memory. When I come back as the control to the CPU, CPU checks whether you have reached the error condition or end condition, and then again asks GPU to execute second iteration. It's not necessary now for the CPU to copy the data to the GPU, because the data is already present in the GPU memory, or it could be present in the GPU memory. Right? Why could it be present is because okay, so we already know that CPU memory is transient. The RAM that we are talking about in the context of CPU is volatile, which means that as you switch off the machine, it goes away. How about GPU's RAM? That is also volatile. However, if you offload some computation to the GPU and control comes back to the CPU, and then you go back to the GPU, it's possible that the memory that you had allocated in the first iteration can still be intact onto the GPU, which means that you will be able to make use of the results across iterations into the GPU itself. So think about it as static variables in a C program. Right? So you have a function. Inside that, I declare a variable as static. And first time I call this function, that static variable, let's say, has some value, I modify it. And then next time I call that function, the previous value of that static variable is going to get retained. It's not going to get recreated the way stack variables are going to get created, or auto variables in C are going to get created. In a similar manner, you can assume or think about it as a heap memory, if that helps you. So the GPU is going to have that memory available and intact even if control comes back to the CPU, and that is going to be very helpful for me because I don't have to copy results again and again to the GPU, interim results. So this is how the optimization part is going to come into play, and it is going to be our responsibility to help the compiler, or our responsibility to decide when not to copy data from CPU to GPU. In a similar manner, like we said that I don't need to copy data from CPU to GPU. In a similar manner, I can say that sometimes I don't need to copy data from GPU to CPU. On the CPU, I'm going to be interested only in the final result. I am not interested in the intermediate results, suppose. In that case, I don't need to copy the intermediate results from GPU to CPU. I can keep it on the GPU. Only when all the iterations are done, I'll copy the results back directly from the CPU. Sometimes you, of course, require the intermediate data because you want to, let's say, visualize the intermediate steps and so on. So that is all right. But sometimes that could also be after, let's say, every 4 iterations or so. So that is also another possibility. There are other aspects which come into play, which we will study as we go along. And that is that these two are two separate devices. Right? So these two could be two separate chips altogether. Right? In fact, you can have a CPU and then insert your GPU there. Many of your laptops will have some inbuilt GPU. These days, your mobile phone might have a GPU, by the way. So when you play games or there is some graphics application, at that time you are internally making use of this GPU. So yeah, so these two are separate devices, and what that means is that these could be executing at the same time. They are totally independent from that perspective. What that means is that when CPU copied the data in step 2 and in step 3 GPU is processing this computation, what is CPU doing? CPU could just be waiting for the GPU to give the results back. That is one possibility. Or it can actually do some useful work. In other words, what is happening is that CPU and GPU are running asynchronously, totally in parallel with each other, and they can partition the data. So if there are 100% data, maybe it can decide that 70% might go to GPU, 30% might come to CPU, and they both are executing the same piece of code and working on different parts of this data. And together they are then merging the results to get the final result. That is also possible. This kind of computation is actually called as a heterogeneous or hybrid computation, where CPU and GPU are working in tandem with each other and achieving a final task. All right, so I hope this program is, this overall flow is clearer. All right, so let me come to specifics of OpenAC. So I gave you a very high level overview of what is CPU and GPU and how the computation is overall, etc. Our understanding of the GPU is going to increase slowly as we learn various OpenACC constructs, because understanding those will require us to understand GPUs a little better. So OpenACC, very similar to OpenMP, is an, let's say, open language, right? So this is language for accelerators. Accelerators are typically characterized by many core hardware. What does that mean? That means they don't have only a few cores, but they have large number of cores. For example, a typical GPU might have a few thousands of cores. There could be accelerators which might have hundreds of cores. So so they are going to accelerate the program considerably, and therefore these are termed as accelerators. Although you cannot say that, okay, is it that beyond 32 it is an accelerator and before 32 it is going to be a multi-core platform? Nothing like that. I mean, there is no direct thing. I mean, that multi-core versus many-core, this transition is nowhere defined. But typically these are separate coprocessors, right? So I don't know if some of you have heard, but when in the old days of 8086, which was useful for integer related programming, there were some mathematical operators which were not very well defined, or those had to be defined in a very different way compared to the integer related operations. Some floating point operations, like let's say I want to do sine function or tan function and so on, or I want to do some sort of other math functions, let's say exponent or something. So Intel came up with a separate chip which was very different from the original chip, which was specifically for mathematical operations. So any of you knows about that, please try to recall. So it used to be named as 8087 math coprocessor. So there used to be these two processors working together into the same machine, 8086 and 8087. Then when 80186, 286, etc. came, this 8087 processor was initially there. Later it got merged as the technologies improved along with the main processor itself. So this accelerator or this coprocessor technology is actually quite old, just that it is now getting used in the context of accelerators. Similar to OpenMP, this is a directive-based program, which means that we are again going to use pragmas, or in the context of Fortran, we are going to use those comments using bang dollar. The extensions, these pragmas are supported for C, C++, and these special comments are supported for Fortran. OpenACC by design is for performance, which means that I want to improve my performance of my parallel application, or I want to improve the performance of my application. And one of the other important aspects of OpenACC is portability, which means that I don't care what the backend device is, right? But by and large, almost all my programs should be able to run onto these different devices. And that's the reason why the backend could as well be a multi-core setup, and OpenACC will still work onto your machine. One might wonder then, why didn't we study OpenACC first, so that I learn about take the same program, run it onto the GPU as well as run it onto the CPU. But OpenMP is, I would say, more prevalent today than OpenACC, and it's very important that we study OpenMP, the CPU-based programming, first. All right, so there are supported platforms. I mean, many of the popular platforms are supported onto this, including NVIDIA GPUs and AMD GPUs. NVIDIA GPUs are the ones that most of us are going to use, but there are others. For example, ARM CPUs are also supported using OpenACC, which means that you take your program, run it. If your accelerator is NVIDIA GPU, the same code will compile and run. If you have AMD GPU, let's say Radeon or Radeon something, you can compile and run it onto that AMD GPU. If you have x86 CPU or mic architecture, the same code without modification will run onto this platform, compile and run onto this platform. So that is really a very, very important aspect of portability, which means that you program once and run anywhere. This is also true with respect to the general purpose languages, right? So many of our codes which we write for our on one machine, you can actually run it on multiple machines, right? The C, C++, Fortran codes, etc. But that is not true for some languages. For example, if I write the code in, let's say, CUDA, which is a language for NVIDIA GPUs, if I write that code in CUDA, I won't be able to run it on, let's say, ARM CPU or AMD GPU. right? It is very proprietary to NVIDIA, whereas OpenACC is open in the sense that uh, 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 it is designed such that you can develop backends for different targets, and it is supposed to work across these different targets as long as it is supported. It's not that it is going to just magically work across arbitrary target architectures. No, it has to be supported. But then um, as far as languages or frameworks such as CUDA are concerned, those are going to be very specific to a particular GPU, in this case NVIDIA GPUs. Okay, so with that introduction, let's come to the basic Hello World program in OpenACC. Right. So the code is I'm going to show is a very simple C program like thing, very similar to OpenMP, just that the pragmas are going to change. So we don't require any hash include omp.h or hash include acc or openacc.h. You can have your own simple usual includes. However, what we are going to require is a different compiler altogether, right? So that is where we have the trade-off with respect to OpenMP. Where OpenMP we hash included omp.h but compile using GCC. In this case, we are not going to compile with GCC. We are going to use some Portland group compiler, which is called as PGCC. So I'll show that. So the main looks simple. It just has a for loop, right? And before that, I'm just going to give a pragma, hash pragma ACC parallel loop, or if you have the for loop inside or do loop inside a Fortran code, I'll just use bang $ACC parallel loop. Right? So whatever is after ACC, that is going to be common between C, C++, and Fortran. Right? What is the expectation out of this code? Well, if there would have been no this pragma doesn't exist, then hello world 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 up to 9 should get printed in the sequential setting. With this parallel loop, the expectation is that, well, this same thing happens, just that this happens by different threads, let's say some number of threads that is currently unknown to us. In the context of OpenMP, we would have said that maybe if it is a 8-core machine, maybe it would have generated 8 threads and the work would have been distributed across these 8 threads. But in this case, it is not clear how many cores does it have, how many threads it is going to generate, etc. Right? So how many times, I mean, definitely hello world I is going to get printed exactly once, but I mean 0 to 9 times, but by how many threads, that is not clear. Right? So we'll study all of that. And one of the important aspects of this is to hide this complexity from the perspective of the users. But of course, there are ways in which that can be specified, and we'll study that as we go along. So first, let's try to compile this program. The compilation will use a binary called PGCC. That is a program which is a Portland group C compiler, using which you can compile this. If you are writing a Fortran program, you can use PG Fortran and whatever hello.f90 or so. Once it generates a dot out, you can run that. I'm talking about your laptop, so you can just run it on your command line, and I get the expected output in this manner. So this so far seems to be okay, but there is a small caveat here. Right? So whatever I have shown, there is some small mistake which I have indicated, which I have not yet told, but there is some clue, and let me make that clue a little emphatic. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to change this 10 to 100. And the expectation is that, again, we print the value 0 to 99 here, but assuming that this is happening in parallel, I expect that some printfs are jumbled. In some rare scenario, it's possible that it might actually be from 0 to 99, but in the exact order. But I expect that by and large, most of the times, there should be some jumbling happening across these printfs. Right? So when I change this to 100, unfortunately, I am getting still the output as 0 to 99. And if I run it again and again, I keep getting the same output. And that is a small indication that there is something wrong. This is not happening in parallel. This is happening sequentially on the CPU, which means that this is probably not going on to the accelerator at all. This is something which we encounter in the first go. So let's understand what is happening. There is a small catch here, which is in the compilation. And we need to know what that, how to take care of that. So the code changes from 10 to 100, and the compilation changes from pgcc hello.c to pgcc -acc hello.c. So without this flag, it's going to just compile in a sequential way, right? And it will run on the CPU. Very similar to when I do GCC without -f openmp, it is going to create a sequel. It's going to ignore those pragmas and just run it sequentially. In a similar manner, we need to give -acc flag. There are other flags which you can give for parallelization, but for now, this suffices. And then I see some small change in the output. There is some jumbling happening, and I'm happy with it that there is some jumbling. And that does show that there is some parallelism across these printfs, right? Again, this is not the most nicest program which you should be parallelizing, but this suffices for our purpose. All right, so this gives us some initial catch. How do you compile on IITM's Aqua cluster? This I'll just take 5 minutes to explain that. In your PBS script, so in Aqua, you have a queuing system. You need to take some sort of a syntax in your script, which is the PBS is the job scheduler, which manages all these queues. So if your job is entering into a queue, then it will take this job, find out where it fits into the cluster, and go to that particular node or set of nodes, run your program, give you the output, and so on. So that is called as PBS. So this script, which needs to be communicated to PBS, the scheduler, we need to make some changes to it. So first thing which we have to do is you have to load a particular compiler. In this case, it is the NVHPC-compiler. That NVHPC compiler is from NVIDIA. Then we have to invoke PGCC, which is going to be a later part. So I'm not going to show the complete PBS script. That I'm going to upload onto Moodle, so you can make use of it and change it if required. If that PGCC happens to be in your path, well and good. You can just do PGCC-acc wherever your hello.c directory file is going to be, and so on. You'll have to change that name if you are using a separate thing. If it is not in the path, then you can give the full path. That is also okay. It's not very important, but importantly, that PGCC should get invoked. After that, so this line is going to compile the code. This line is going to just set up certain paths so that it finds the libraries, etc. Then that compilation is going to generate a.out file, which I'm going to run. And then after the running is over, I'm going to remove that a.out. Otherwise, it will keep creating probably multiple copies. I mean, of course, it will override, but in case you create separate directories, then it is going to have a.out additionally in your folder. This PBS script I'm going to upload. So by the time you watch this video, hopefully it will be uploaded on Moodle. There is also a sample video which is created by our TA, Monica, to run your code onto Aqua cluster, as well as how to perform some basic optimizations in your code and so on. So that will give you a nice overview of OpenACC in one, let's say, 10-minute video. And the corresponding code is also available on her GitHub link. So I'm going to also give these links onto Moodle. So at this stage, we'll stop, but and we'll continue discussing about the OpenACC syntax, etc. But do try this sample code which is given, and just make sure that it is running for you, right? And if you face any trouble, then just post any queries on Moodle. All right, we'll stop here. See you.